And the big takeaway from the training was to act locally and really get involved in whatever local organizations or civic groups are working on these issues. And that's what I've done. And I've haven't looked back. It's been a wonderful experience. I've met so many wonderful people through this work, and I feel like I'm really making a difference tackling this huge issue, which you've probably seen in this film. So to get started, I just want people to share kind of their, maybe what shocked you, what did you learn from this film that you might not have known before, a memorable statistic, or what were you most surprised to learn? And feel free to jump in to share. And I'm going to ask Bea to help me see if people, and feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in to see, to share your thoughts.
I'll be on the lookout in the chat if that's what you need.
Yeah, and if I think I should get notified if people raise their hand, but. So I can start. I know for me, I had seen quite a bit of this information before, but I really enjoyed the way it was presented in a tighter, a tight timeline, very succinct, and also showing the breadth of the work that's happening globally. So taking us all over the world, piecing together all of the various scientific methodologies in a pretty rapid fire but clear way to showcase what has been happening to our climate over time, and clearly showing that this climate change that we're witnessing at this point is in direct relation to the anthropogenic activities and fossil fuels being burned at an unprecedented rate. I think some of the most memorable pieces came in the statistics about how the Keeling curve kind of was confirmed and showcased exactly where the Industrial Revolution started, and that directly coincides with the incredible, it's called often called the hockey stick curve of showcasing how greenhouse gas emissions and carbon dioxide levels in particular have just kicked up right after we started really burning fossil fuels. I also really took away the intense impact it's having on our natural systems and how nature's bearing the brunt of trying to absorb a lot of our emissions, and especially forests taking in 25% and the oceans absorbing something like 90% of heat related to the excess carbon dioxide. And those numbers really stuck with me.
Ken also mentions the discussion on regenerative agriculture, that he really loved that.
Yeah, I think that is really inspiring too. And we'll get to this a little bit later too, but as an agricultural based state of Illinois, we have a lot to potentially contribute to agricultural solutions to the climate crisis. And then Ashley mentions her takeaway was that there are so many options that can help us mitigate the climate crisis, and just that there are so many amazing scientists and minds working on this. Yes, yeah, and to see everyone passionate about their work was so inspiring. I really remember the woman who studied all of the tiny details of the ancient shells and just how lovingly she spoke of the shells and looked at each, detail and was deciphering, I think she referred to herself as like a forensic, scientist looking back in time. And yeah, all of the incredible methodologies that went into showing what's been happening and piecing together the puzzle pieces of our past climate history. Um, so yeah, I was so impressed by all of that. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. Set of questions. So I wanted to explore vulnerability and resilience. So I know personally I can't help but watching documentaries on climate change and always feeling so vulnerable and just very small in face of it all. So I wanted to hear from the group about what climate change impacts are you witnessing personally. I'm thinking of the little boy in the film who's walking through his flooded Virginia coast town and trying to piece together like what is this going to look like for me and my family, right? Like what I'm just have to wear these boots all the time and we're going to maybe have to lift our house or so what's impacting you, your family, your friends? You might have family and friends who live in other parts of the country or in other countries, and kind of thinking about what impacts are you fearing the most for the future, and then going into the how do we adapt to these things that we're seeing and what can we do to mitigate. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in with kind of talking about what impacts are you experiencing. Oh, and kind of connecting back to the last topic, Ken said the paint on solar film was fascinating. Yeah, I went right away and kind of went to that website and researched how far along is this and like when can we get it. Um, I was really inspired by that and making these technologies affordable. And then I don't know the full name, but HGL 4. Important to be active ourselves and not just let the smart scientists carry the load. Yes, yeah. Um, and looking at people with sentiments like Chicago weather is much better than it used to be, right? Yeah, but exactly like, oh, but what does that mean, right? One area I told somebody one time, they're like, "Oh yeah, but we're having much milder winters. It's very comfortable in Alabama." I said, "Yeah, but one area's like balmy winters is another area's famine, right? Or because it's upsetting weather patterns around the whole world." Fires in California, yes, Ashley, that hits really close to home for me. My cousin is a firefighter out of Pasadena, and he keeps getting called out to fight these massive wildfires in the mountains. And it's frightening, really frightening. And the conditions they have to endure um, are pretty terrible. They don't even have respiratory gear. They're out there just breathing all of this in, fighting the fires to the best of their ability, waiting for aerial support. And this year I was so worried about him the whole time, and he lost some of his colleagues to these blazes. This was a prolonged and protracted fire season that just was devastating. And then, yeah, what will happen if Lake Michigan raises 3 more feet? We've seen our shoreline here along Evanston disappearing really fast. Um, water levels are rising in all areas. In many areas, it's increasing flooding. not only coastal, but intercoastal. And yeah, I mean, raising 3 more feet, some of our beaches will be totally gone. And there's only so much we can do, right? So we have to think about resiliency, especially being next to a large body of water like that and in an area that experiences extreme storms and precipitation events. And that's one of the main threats that Evanston and this area faces are these huge, large-scale precipitation events that are just getting more severe and more frequent. The 100-year floods that are now happening like every year. And our infrastructure in particular in Evanston is old. All our storm systems are, are over 100 years old. So we have a lot to think about in terms of investing in infrastructure to protect properties, to manage stormwater, think about green infrastructure to absorb more stormwater into our back into the watershed. And we have to think about what that means for prioritizing our budgets at the city level and also taking action in our own properties and what we can do to help take some mitigation efforts, adaptation efforts against this threat of increased precipitation events. Anyone else want to? My son's above, right over my shoulder. Anyone else want to chime in on topics of vulnerability and resilience and think about, share some ideas of what, oops, I already flipped it. I want to give anybody a chance who wanted to chime in on this. Feel free to speak up. Don't mind my son popping up behind me.
For me, if I may also participate, it makes me feel very vulnerable when I think of my children, what their future will be. Because I'm like, my life is kind of made already, but I don't know about them. And also another issue that really, really affects me is how my well-being is in connection to the lack of well-being of so many people in the world. How I'm breathing clean air because they're breathing dirty air, right? Because they're the ones making the stuff I use every day. And that to me is really, I have a big conflict with that. And I try to make my children understand that we are not innocent in any of this. And that
Yes.
there's a lot to do, and we cannot be comfortable anymore. I mean, I think like as a species, we've lost our innocence. We cannot we must understand that we are living at the expense of others.
Yeah, and that right, Bea brings up a great point, is that these impacts do not affect everyone equally, and for the most part, for our geographic location, we're in a privileged spot, and then within our community, some members are in a more privileged position than others because they can afford different levels of insurance or can pay for that emergency pump out of their basement when it gets flooded or whatever the case is, or can afford air conditioning during the extreme hot weather events, but not everybody can weather these impacts the same. And it's already the most vulnerable among us who have paid the steepest costs around the world and in our communities. And they will only continue to be exacerbated as this worsens over time. And we've seen it with the intense hurricanes that have hit our communities in the United States, people who've been flooded out of their communities and aren't able to return, or on the other hand, have no choice but to live in the floodplain, which is sometimes the case. So we always have to think of And this comes to the fact that climate justice is an environmental justice issue. It's a social justice issue, and people around communities around the world suffering the most are those with the least resources. So, while we may be able to buy ourselves some time, literally, with the luxuries that we're able to afford, not everybody is in that position. So this is an urgent crisis for all, but for some, it's just a crisis happening on a daily basis, and from a health perspective as well. Yeah, thank you, Bea. Yeah, climate reality leadership. And they have, usually it's in person, but it's been virtual periodic trainings through the course of the year, both nationally in the United States and then international locations as well. All right. I really liked how the film showcased different science advancements and technology, and that really gave a lot of hope um, to the audience of watching the film. I wanted us to think about what advancements in science and technology that address climate change excite you the most, and what do you think we should be pushing for specifically in our community? And then thinking about your own residents, what of these technologies do you want to see in your own home? And then are there any barriers to acquiring those technologies? And if so, what are they? So thinking about, it's so exciting that there is all this advancement, there are all these technologies, we have solutions at hand, but how do we get those solutions into people's homes, into people's communities, right? And I think that is the big piece. The film didn't really talk about that so much, right? Like how, yes, these things exist, but how do we make them the norm? How do we get these technologies in everybody's home, in everybody's community? So I don't know if anybody wanted to share ideas of what they felt was most exciting to them and what you think we should do here in Evanston. So we have a participant share efficiency and vegetables. Yeah, I think building efficiency to focus on, we have old housing stock and old building stock in this community. I do think that we need to be really concerned with building efficiency in Evanston and the surrounding area, and vegetables. I think that's a reference to local food production and regenerative agriculture. And yeah, if we were able to reform our agricultural system, that alone would, I think, almost solve the climate crisis. And please, yeah, unmute yourselves and share your thoughts openly.
Yeah, this is Ken. Um, we're engaged right now with Evanston Black Lives Matter about getting a West End Garden grant from Northwestern. And it deals with exactly what you're talking about, food efficiency for underserved communities. And it's not led by us, the Edible Evanston portion of CGE, but by local activists. And we're really excited about the opportunity to do that, to try to get food and vegetables into the local community.
Absolutely. That's exciting. Yeah, and I love that as a local solution to, what is a big problem, but we do have to think about what we have control over, right? And what we can actually affect change with locally. And I want to say that oh, I just lost my thought. But that the the technologies and implementing some of these projects and ideas, it's still, it's going to take some risks and some thinking outside of the box. And we need to form collaborations. Like Ken said, he's working with another group to look into exploring this new solution for acquiring food and growing food locally. So we have to think about reaching beyond our normal bubbles. I think that was another key thing from the training that I had with Climate Reality is like, we've got to kind of bust our bubble of like comfort and just get out of that comfort zone, because this is such a huge issue. We're going to have to work with everybody in the community on devising solutions to these huge problems.
Lauren, one more thing. Um, Being a civil and environmental engineer, I read daily updates on technology that's going on. And I am blown away by the technology that's focusing on the whole issues we're talking about. And day by day, I read things about electrifying roadways and vegetables used in concrete. And I mean, also, there's just an absolutely amazing amount of research that's going on in the universities and elsewhere to help solve these problems. And I'm just, my hope level goes up, even though everything else is going down, about the future. And it's kind of, can we get there fast enough to solve the problems? But just the message I'm trying to say right now is that there are an awful lot of real initiatives that are working. I mean, not just
Yep.
pie in the sky, but that are working, and they're trying to figure out how to scale them up to make them available to everybody that needs them. So I'm super encouraged by that, even though I'm discouraged by the rest of the stuff we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. I am also, yeah, I feel like we in this country and many other countries, we do have the freedom to pursue all of this research and ideas and just throw everything out there and collaborate. And like Ken said, we're seeing, we could have solar roadways. We can, the sky's the limit. So from that perspective, I feel a lot of optimism. And Ashley,
go ahead.
mentions artificial meats. Yeah, there are food scientists and everybody is working on this. Rethinking diets and what it means to produce food. I'm super excited by local, oh my gosh, Ken, help me remember what that took Hune Bakery's place. It's called Market. It's a
Fresh Bar on Main Street.
Yeah, or Dempster.
Uh,
Is it a?
You're in Dempster, yeah. Farmers
Oh,
Market.
yeah, it's called Farmers
The
Market,
Fresh
right?
Farmers Market. Yeah.
Oh, so there's a lot of people locally here who are connected with Illinois farmers and Wisconsin farmers and are really trying to focus on sourcing food from responsible producers who are taking care of the land and really understand what it means to improve soil health and sequester carbon in the soils. And I'm happy to share information about that after this too, but I think we need to think a lot about food and where we get our food and what we're consuming and who's making it as part of this conversation. And then Ashley also shared that she'd like to see more solar energy in Evanston and recognizes that there are financial barriers. Yeah. And we, um, I'm encouraged by seeing more and more solar installations going up, even just looking around the neighborhood here and there. I see them popping up on homes, and then hearing about more people signing up for community solar. And Bea says that they're going to be having a community solar event coming up, co-sponsored by City of Evanston, and you can learn more about what it means to be a subscriber to a community solar installation. And that's really, really exciting. But there have been subsidies available for solar installations on homes and businesses, and hopefully those will only get better as maybe the new administration offers new incentives. And hopefully with the passage of the Clean Energy Jobs Act at the state level, we might see more state level incentives for individual solar installations as well. And then someone has written that there seems like there's no excuse for Evanston to still have internal combustion engine vehicles at the city level, right? So for the city owned fleet, we would hope that they would convert to electric. I think for the bigger machines like the garbage trucks, it'll be challenging, but already there are electric vehicles with huge towing capacity and electric pickup trucks and things. And so it's only a matter of time, and we do need to make those transitions. Okay, I want to shift into talking about nature-based solutions, and this bridges, with agriculture as well. And this is something that I get really excited about. So in the film, we learned that nature is doing a heavy lift for us, trying to balance out our overuse of fossil fuels. The trees, the forests are working overtime, trying to pull that CO2 out of the air. The oceans are being forced to absorb so much more than they were intended to, with devastating consequences. But what it shows us is the resilience of nature and how nature is already, the systems in nature are designed to do this work, right? So just thinking about nature-based solutions to climate change, what type of solutions do you think are super important? What are some that we should be implementing here in our community and in our state? And then what are co-benefits to investing in nature-based solutions? And I mean, I know I might be jumping to conclusions that people understand what I mean by nature-based solutions, so I'll explain a little bit. But when we're protecting forests and increasing natural areas and their native tree and plant populations and improving the ability to sequester carbon in the soil, also just looking after the ocean health and thinking about improved agricultural techniques that focus on away from monocultures and into polyculture and different techniques like that. So I don't know if anyone wants to share their thoughts on nature-based solutions and what could work well for us here in Evanston. More trees. Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of exciting work being done to protect Evanston's urban canopy, protect our trees. And there's an ordinance that will be designating natural areas here in Evanston, and that's a big step to having something formally called out as a natural area as a means of protecting it, much like the national park system did in the country would say, this area is designated as a national park. This area is designated as a natural area that is to be protected and preserved and taken care of, with the point of restoring it to the best of our ability with native plants and trees to help it do the most good for our ecosystem here. And would composting be considered a nature-based solution? 40 up to 40% of our food is wasted. Yeah. So this food, if we're just pitching it in the trash, is ending up in the landfill, and the landfills release methane, which is even more potent than carbon dioxide. And so where you can take any organic matter, and if it's composted, it can be turned into nutrient-rich soil. So not only are you keeping it out of a landfill and keeping methane out of the atmosphere, but you're also creating jobs. You're for people to pick up the waste, to process I shouldn't call it waste, it's treasure. to process the scraps into a new precious resource that can be sold. So this is an economic strategy as well. And we need to always be thinking of what makes sense economically in all of these solutions. They have to make business sense for these to work and for them to be adopted, especially on a large scale. Composting to me is a no-brainer. It's a wonderful business model. It provides tons of good jobs. It provides a quality resource, and it then helps to regenerate our soils and improve our gardens. So it's definitely, we need to be thinking of that. It's a cyclical system, circular system. So we need to be thinking of how many more circular systems can we create, because with any waste, where anything that was created used fossil fuels to create it. And in anything that we throw away in a linear fashion, that fossil fuel energy and all that we paid for in the price of humanity and what we're suffering with is just wasted. It just goes right back into the landfill, then creates another problem in the form of methane. So it's double bad, right? So anything we can think of circular economy related strategies, we should be harnessing those. And Ken brings up, why does the city not allow small compost or city compost piles? And I don't know if there's a specific provision against it, but I would argue that if there is a specific provision, we should be advocating for one. I saw another special about, I think it was a town in England. They have a local compost heap, and for anyone who isn't able to manage a compost heap at their own home, this acts as a community compost pile, and it was very well supported. It was a great community source of pride, and was a good small business, right? So I think if we don't allow this now, I think it's worth exploring if we can have the support to create something like this in our own community. Someone's in the waiting room. Maybe. Okay. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about will, right? So we got a really great, hopeful message about the solutions that exists in terms of technology, science, and nature. But what I think was telling is there wasn't too much touching on political action or showcasing countries that are really doing a great job at any of this. And it comes down to, you might have the solutions, right? You might have all the technology in the world, but if you don't have the will to act on any of this, or decision makers don't have the will, then you're stuck, right? And kind of in the same place. So I'm thinking about, we're smart enough, sure, but are we wise enough to act quickly enough? And how do we create and support the will to act? I think there are enough people out there who want to do the right thing, but what's holding us back, right? What's holding people back? And then who are the the decision makers in all of this, and how do we as, community members, regular people, how concerned citizens, how do we influence the decision making? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, about the will. Oh, and thanks, Bea, for sharing about the circular economies. It has a good overview of that in video explaining what that means. So understanding that carbon is too cheap, right? And externalities are not priced in. Yeah, the fossil fuels have been subsidized forever and are artificially priced low. So where you're looking at in the United States, maybe you're paying $2 something a gallon for a gallon of gasoline. In Europe, it's more like $6 a gallon, right? So, and emissions there are per capita are far less than they are in the United States. So, carbon is fossil fuels are not priced fairly. So that's something that we have to reconcile, hopefully. And in terms of externalities not being priced in, that also goes for anything produced, right? So we're thinking of how goods are so cheap, right? Why is it that we're able to buy an item for so cheap and then feel okay throwing it away because it was so cheap? But really think of all that went into making that item. Yeah. And the good thing now is too, though, that wind and solar technologies and the cost of renewable energies is technically less expensive than fossil fuel generated electricity. We do have a problem, though, in this country that the natural gas industry through fracking has provided a glut of cheap natural gas. So we have an added challenge to kind of overcome that. And for many people, the allure of cheap natural gas is too great. But this is when we have to think about who are the decision makers here and how do we really influence them. And in many cases, it's through the political system. And we have to think about selecting the right leaders who are going to help us make the changes that we need to, no matter how hard that they're going to be. Did anyone else want to share anything on this topic? Can add to the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. And I will also say, at every level to make oneself aware of elected officials and potential elected officials and hold them accountable to these issues that are important to you. Many people, sometimes it's not even on their agenda to even have to think about climate change. And that shouldn't be the case in this day and age. So if you have candidates, even whether it's at the aldermanic level, we have an election coming up in Evanston, at the aldermanic level, the mayoral level, state level, national level, write to your potential elected officials or currently elected officials and ask of them, what are your thoughts on climate change? What's your platform, right? And if you don't have a platform, like, you need to have one, right? Push. It's way past time for people to just shrug this issue off, right? Every serious person who wants to be involved in government needs to understand the stakes at hand, and it takes informed citizens to really make that possible. And someone has raised about glass windows and buildings in terms of efficiency, like efficient windows. I'm not really sure what to say about that, but other than, obviously we have a lot of old housing stock and old building stock in Evanston, and it is worth investing in improved, uh, in your double glazed windows, whatever, like um, energy efficient windows, because the old single pane windows are really so terrible, so drafty. You can only do so much to caulk around those, and storm windows only do so much, but it's a worthwhile investment, and there are usually some tax rebates to upgrade the windows in your homes, but um, I'm not sure what else to share about that. We over time we were able to upgrade the windows in our house, and it has made a huge difference. Our house was built in 1902, and yeah, it's been a work in progress ever since. Um, I think I wanted to talk. Oh, I wanted to split into two groups. So now you'll be forced to talk to each other and unmute yourselves. So Bea will do a breakout, and I want you to get a chance to get to know each other, and it'll be broken out into two groups. We'll just talk about how you think one person's actions can make a difference, and then what you and I can do to help, or what you're already doing to address climate change, and we can all learn from each other. So Bea, will you help us break into two chats, two breakout rooms? And we'll discuss for maybe, what do you think, Bea? 4 minutes? Okay.
Welcome back. Lauren, you're muted.
I just saw that. That was so nice getting to know some of you in the breakout. I don't know if anyone from the other breakout wanted to share any takeaways or anything. Bea, were you in that breakout or were you?
I remained in
You
the
were in the main session?
Yes.
Okay. Or in the void,
Yes.
an endless void somewhere. Great. I know that at least in our breakout, we talked about thinking, feeling compelled for our children's generation and really what can we actually do locally? What do we have control over? And seeing how we can get involved. And um, someone mentioned that in the film, focusing on the things that you can do about planting a garden and growing your own food or whatever it is, or if you can do solar panels on your house, or thinking about the things you can do in your own home. And then to Ken, yeah, and Living Soul, thanks Ken Castman for sharing about his thoughts on local food production, and shout out to Edible Evanston. And if anyone on here has never been to the Eggleston Orchard, which is orchard and permaculture site, it's just across from the Ecology Center on the other side of McCormick. It is a fantastic living permaculture installation where you can see volunteers' fruitful work and learn about all types of sustainable permaculture. But Ken can tell us more about that. But I highly recommend going there if you have never been there. And if you have children, there's a playground right nearby, so they can play and then also learn about locally grown food. So I just wanted to end with seeing maybe use your little hand features on your icons if you've heard that of Evanston's Climate Action and Resilience Plan. Just a show of hands, or raise your hand if you have your video on. So we've got some thumbs up. Great. Yeah, some knowledge of this. Good. So Evanston has a climate action resilience plan, and the climate piece of it is a third in the series of plans that the city has had since 2008, which is pretty remarkable for a U.S. city. So everyone should be very proud of this, and I want to just always increase awareness that this plan exists. It was passed in 2018. Unanimously December 2018 by City Council, a group of dedicated community volunteers. 17 of us worked really hard for a whole year to create this plan. And it's our first resilience plan, which is a huge step forward as well, thinking not only of climate mitigating the effects of climate change, but also how are we going to adapt to climate change moving forward. And just thinking, we don't have too much time left, but and if anyone has to go, you can sign off. But we do have pretty clear goals set forth in that plan, including net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And renewable energy for the whole city by 2035, for example, zero waste by 2050. So some pretty ambitious goals, and it's going to take all of us working on it on different aspects to really get there. I want to think about, I don't know if we have time to go into this, but if there's pieces of the plan that resonate with you, and where do you think implementation responsibility lies, right? Is it the city only, or do we all play a part here? And then how do you think you might be able to advance the plan as well? And I will just show, if you search on the city's website, you will find this document. it has some appendices, but I encourage you all to dive into the plan to the best of your ability.
It's in the chat. I just
Oh,
posted it.
great. Thanks, Bea. And think about these goals, right? We have building efficiency goals, renewable energy goals, zero waste, transportation and mobility, urban canopy and green space, and a whole focus on outreach, education, behavior change. And then we have a whole resiliency component. So I feel like there's something in the plan for everyone. And if everyone kind of looks at it that way and thinks about what their passions are, what their interests are, what their expertise is, the chances are is that they will align with some aspect of the plan and think about how they might be able to lend their talents and passion to helping this become a reality for Evanston. Is it really going to take all of us working together to make this to meet these ambitious goals? Great. So if anyone wants to share any final thoughts, otherwise I will share too with everyone if I can figure out how to get out of this screen. I have a document called, it's my CARP, my Climate Action Resilience Plan. It's laid out in kind of a checkbox format in categories, so you can think of the different actions that you can take in your daily lives to align with our CARP, which is the nickname for our plan. And I will try to attach that here. But does anyone have any questions or final thoughts that they'd like to share? Oh boy, here we go. I hope this is the right version of this I have. So how are we doing towards the 2025 goal? Yeah, that's a really good question. So the good thing about the past two plans, the past two climate plans, so we did meet our goals laid out in those plans. And it was a 25% reduction. So 2005 greenhouse gas emissions is the baseline for measuring progress towards the different goals we're setting for ourselves. And that ties back to the Kyoto Protocol kind of criteria. So we met our first goals laid out in those previous plans largely through the community aggregation plan, which had all of residential properties as well as city properties and very small commercial properties all in a an aggregation electric commitment that had all of our electricity sourced from renewable energy sources, so through renewable energy credits. So our wind power was produced somewhere in Ohio or something, and we purchased that from the grid. Moving forward, we're going to have to diversify our streams, and we also have to really tackle commercial properties because majority of commercial properties are not sourcing their electricity from renewable sources. So also the inventories, the greenhouse gas inventories for the city have not been made public for 2019 or 2020. So the latest data we have is 2018. I talked to our sustainability manager, Kumar Jensen, the other day, and he said that they're working on finalizing the data for the last 2 years of inventory, and that should be public hopefully soon. So then we can actually see how we're doing towards our goal. And we'd like to have more transparency around these metrics from the city.
There's another question about how does this climate action plan going to reach every single person in our community from Living Soul?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So part of when we were putting together the plan, we were specifically, we had an outreach and engagement team, and we were trying to garner community support and do education around the creation of the plan, and work with community members from all over the community on this. It's actually pretty challenging to reach everyone, and to try to showcase how important this is, because everyone has different priorities. But what we really want to do, and what we've been working with the city on, is saying, well, this needs to be integrated into all aspects of decision making, right? There should be, when we're looking at making decisions at the city level, we should be looking through the CARP lens and through an equity lens. That all decisions need to be going through these lenses. That nothing should be in contradiction to what we've committed to here, right? So part of it will be, a lot of it will be at policy level. The plan also calls for a public relations campaign. So I have hopes that we will, make this accessible, engaging, fun, educational, and garner community buy-in, and meet people where they're at on this. I think one of the exciting things about the plan is that there's so much, and like I said, people can connect with it on the things that they're interested in, especially if they have a passion for the built environment, and want to work on building efficiency, or if they have a passion for natural systems, or renewable energy. So there's a lot of ways for people to connect with this plan. And I think that I'm hopeful we'll be able to get more resources to do a really great PR campaign, hopefully soon. But if people have ideas for ways they think that this plan should speak to people, or for ways that the city or community groups in alliance with that support the plan, like Citizens Greener Evanston or the library system, feel that we would be most effective in this, please share those ideas with us, because we are always looking for the most relevant ways for this to be relatable to the population. Does anyone else have anything they want to ask or share? Okay. So then
Thank you.
here's a
Thank-
glimpse of the MyCarp. And I think I shared it in the chat. I think it went through successfully, so you guys can
Yeah. Mhm.
click that to open it. Yeah, it looks like it's the right version. And feel free to reach out to me through the library or through Citizens Greener Evanston. And thanks to Bea and the Evanston Public Library for hosting this great event.
Thank you, Lauren, for your time and your experience, and bringing everything back to the local, but at the same time, the global level. I think that's very, very valuable. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks,
Ken.
Ken. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.